Hi, everyone. It's Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media. This week's Rutgers Rant is brought to you by the New Brunswick Development Corporation. A big thank you to our sponsor and to all of our listeners for the continued support. Now let's get to the show.
From NJ.com and the Star Ledger, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights. With your host, Steve Politi, and Rutgers insiders Keith Sargent and James Cratch. Let's start shopping.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Rant. Steve Politi here, James Cratch, Keith Sargent. Lots to talk about today on the show. We haven't had one in a little while here. We got the spring game coming up. We've got the lacrosse revolution all of a sudden here in Piscataway. We are Lacrosse University. Going to discuss whether or not this is the best season in Rutgers sports history. But Cratch, we got to start, man, with your achieving what I am sure is the equivalent of most journalists winning a Pulitzer Prize, would be talking to Mike and the Mad Dog on the same day for the same story. All right, so they coached the spring game back in the Graber days. Just take us through, first of all, landing the interview with Mike Francesa and what it was like when he popped up and you called him, or whatever. Just take us through the whole thing.
Yeah, so basically I texted both of them, and Dog literally got back to me within like 5 minutes, and like 5 minutes after that, back with a text, and in 5 minutes of that, Mike just calls, and I go, "Hey, Mike, how are you?" And he literally and just launches right into being Mike Francesa. I cannot begin to describe what it's like to interview the two of them. And first off, they were both tremendous. Very appreciative of how cooperative they were. How they really, you could tell that this was something that they really enjoyed, and it's amazing because it's just like, they are who they are. Like, they're John Beiser, the former Rutgers sports information guy, said, like, you can't fake that for 6 hours a day for 19 years. Like, they are in character because that is their character. And it's just such a strange experience. It's kind of surreal. Like, you're interviewing them, and you've done thousands of interviews in your career, but it's like Mike and the Mad Dog are on the radio, but only it's through your phone directly at you. And you're just sitting there, like, they say things, and you're like, oh, my God, Mike. Like, I have on audio Dog going, like, that's a good job out of you, James. Like, that will be saved. Like,
did you tell him, long-time listener, first-time caller?
I did not. I wish I had. No. Like, I literally, like, that audio file is saved in, like, 19 different, like, places, hard drives now. And I expect my children, when I die, I want, like, an eternal loop in the casket. That's a good job out of you, James. Like, that's what it really should be. So, no, look, I think that, obviously, like, look, this is very silly. Like, as a guy once told me, it's interesting nonsense. But I do think that there is a bigger, overarching theme in this, is that spring game, 1991, was kind of the beginning of Rutgers acting like a big-time football school would. They had been to the Garden State Bowl a couple years ago. They were going into the Big East. Doug Graber is a guy who I think is very underrated in the school's history, in that he doesn't get enough credit for it because you had the Terry Shea debacle between Graber and Schiano's first stint. But he was a guy who kind of came in and said, okay, like, Rutgers is going to be in a conference. We want to win. We want media attention. We want to act like a college football program should. And that was kind of one of the first steps to doing it. He's a guy who got the job and immediately was like, hey, these two wacky guys on WFAN, like, I should build a relationship with them. So Doug would go on this show every now and then, see him at golf outings. And he kind of said, look, the spring practice sucks for the players. It sucks for the fans. Let's do something to make it fun and interesting. And he was able to leverage his relationship with them and getting them to come out. And it was a really big deal. And I think it was one of those first moments where Rutgers got, a week-long infomercial on WFAN. And as I wrote in the story, Mike and the Mad Dog were already Mike and the Mad Dog. Like, they were an event everywhere they went already. And Rutgers got that kind of, priceless exposure.
There's so many little nuggets I love in this story. And, of course, the first quote from Mike is just hilarious. Who's going to read this? It's just but just perfect. But for me, I don't know why. And this is I just love the fact, Sarge, and you love I know you know where I'm going with this. Love the fact that Harvey Yavner, of all people, Harvey Yavner, this guy, the nicest man in the world, from the Trenton Times, covered the program forever. He would sit in the press box. I mean, they could lose 50-0, and he would say something nice about Greg Schiano. Just destroyed the whole thing.
Yep. That was tremendous.
How about that, Sarge?
That's a good job by you, Steve.
That's a good job by Harvey. Harvey was not taking it. Harvey was not having any of it.
He did not like it at all. No, that was it was tremendous. And yeah, we both started our careers, and we knew Harvey, and Harvey was absolutely the type of guy, a columnist who really always was flattering toward Rutgers during those days. For him to take a shot at him, that was
weird. Strange thing to get salty about. Yeah. Oh man.
Well, the incredible thing is too, like this, like one of the newspaper stories said that Dog was it was obviously spring game was on a Saturday, had mentioned that Dog on the Friday night before was going to have to drive up to UMass to give a speech at the UMass basketball banquet because they had lost a bet with John Calipari that if it's like, this is how crazy it is. Like, they bet him, well, if UMass beats Fordham, which nowadays it's like saying if Alabama beats, Piscataway High, we're going to come speak at your banquet. And Dog goes, no, that wasn't it. That was later in the year. It was Mike and I both went. He goes, we were in Atlantic City for the Holyfield George Foreman fight at Caesar's Palace.
Wow. Back when AC would have big fights.
Yeah, back when AC have big fights and everything. No, it was tremendous. A lot of good memories. Doug Graber was great. A lot of people helped out, but no, it's just a fun story. And like the photo of Mike being carried off the field. And one of the things that's funny is you mentioned Harvey, like that was just a priceless quote you had to put in, but he was like the only reporter who was like even skeptical about this. Like there were like Joe, the late great Joe Calabrese, he interviewed both of them like they were the head coaches of the game. It was incredible.
The fact that Francesa tried to imitate Parcells. The same game plan as the 90 Super Bowl.
Well, I mean, if you, like my favorite quote was when Francesa's like, we had the ham and egg guys on my roster. Because that was the thing, like they had this strange draft where like Francesa truly pulled an upset because not only did Mad Dog get most of the skill players, he somehow managed to get the only kicker and punter in the program. And he still lost the game. So
what a choke, epic choke by the Dog in that game. That's great. And it was before the thing that I really thought was really before every spring game now has some kind of gimmick. It was before that was a thing that every program did. And hey, give credit to Doug Graber I had no idea. Really, I did. I learned that from your story. I had no idea he was responsible for that. So that's some good stuff.
And I asked several people, and they said 100% that was all Doug Graber. That was not a PR guy thinking it up. That was Graber.
Underrated part of Doug Graber's tenure. Graduate assistant was Greg Schiano, followed by Butch Jones, finalist for the job this time around. So, he clearly, he had a good staff, good eye for talent back then.
Steve Spagnola, I believe, was on his staff.
Yep, Spags was on the staff too. So, yeah.
And Pat Flaherty.
There's your next oral history. All right, let's dive into the current spring game. Little bit less interesting, unless you enjoy griping about attendance. Could be 5,000 people in the building. Just thinking about what we want to see here, guys. Obviously, the backup quarterback situation is going to be a big one. Finally, Evan Simon, Cole Snyder feel like they're auditioning for that role. Although I think Johnny Langen's going to have something to say about that based on all the raving reviews about him in his development. Sarge, what are you looking for? What do you want to see from this game? What's interesting to you?
Yeah, it's a backup quarterbacks. I mean, I'll say that, it's going to be our first real look at both of them. You're right. I mean, I just reading between the lines and how much they've raved about Johnny Langen, I kind of feel like if anything was to happen to Noah Vedral, that Langen would not only get an extended look, but he might be the guy that they would rely on to really carry the offense if that was the case. However, we until we really see Evan Simon and Cole Snyder in an extended period of action, we can't really say that neither of them can play. This will be our first opportunity. A couple other guys, Josh Youngblood, I know Graciano acknowledged the fact that he was a little banged up early in camp. It'll be our first opportunity to see him, Crookshank together. And again, I mean, Graciano's not going to. They'll try to probably open it up and try to put on a show. It'll be on BTN, and they'll try to put on a show. But he's going to keep it very vanilla, and there's not going to be any program secrets that are going to be divulged.
It'll just be exciting to see a practice, Cratch. I mean, we haven't. When was the last practice that any of us watched? I mean, just to be able to see some of these guys on the bottom of the roster that you're just not, you haven't seen in yet. Period.
Yeah, no, you haven't seen a lot of these guys at all. You haven't seen a lot of these guys since the 2019 spring game. It's going to be fascinating. I want to see the offensive line, how they mix and match, like what guys are out there at what spots. Same with the defensive line. Intrigued to see the secondary, just because I think there's a lot of depth questions there. I agree with Sarge. I don't think we're going to see a whole heck of a lot. I'm sure they'll have some razzle-dazzle built in to kind of excite the 5,000 fans. Let me just say something. I feel like might get there early and do a head count, because after all the belly aching, all those tickets better be off the shelf.
There better be 4,999 people. And you're absolutely right. I agree with that totally. All right, let's jump over to lacrosse. From meaningless games to meaningful games in lacrosse. Rutgers, who did not win a lacrosse postseason game for 31 years, get 2 in one weekend. The men and the women both winning their games. The women later eliminated by Stony Brook, who knew they were a lacrosse power, women's lacrosse. And now Rutgers gets to play Carolina in lacrosse, a true lacrosse power. What is the significance of this, fellas? I mean, obviously fans are not going to go gaga for lacrosse, but I mean, the fact that you're seeing some of these programs capitalize on the facilities, capitalize on coaching. I mean, what do you think overall, Cratch?
I think for a lacrosse standpoint, and I tweeted this, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever why Rutgers men's and women's lacrosse, the State University of New Jersey, should not be in the NCAA tournament pretty much every year and eventually contending for Big Ten titles and national titles. We live in a state where lacrosse is very popular. The town of Summit alone probably could put together 3 state championship teams between the Summit High team, the Del Barton team, and the Summit JV team. It's like we have this, and you're not going to get all of them. And I think it's a lot like wrestling in the sense that the Ivy Leagues are a serious contender for a lot of these top recruits. But there's absolutely no reason why Rutgers men's and women's lacrosse should not be powerhouse programs year in and year out. You've got the recruiting grounds, you've got the lacrosse culture, you've got the facilities now at the Rutgers Center. It was a long time coming for both programs. Now they need to take off. This cannot be a one-off. This has to be an every year thing going forward.
Will it be an every year thing, Sarge? What do you think?
I do. I talked to Brian Breck after the game, and he mentioned, the Rutgers Center, this is their first, opportunity to really showcase it now. And, they had just moved in to their shiny new facility, and now they had the practice field. They have the resources now. I remember when he first took over, doing a story on what Jim Stagnita had, and high school coaches around the state were talking about the porta potties that the fans had to go to, and basically the facility was equivalent to a Group 2 high school lacrosse program basically. So he's really has some resources. They've put a lot of money into it, and now is the time. After 10 years, they finally got there, and it's nice to see them get a win. It would be great to see him beat Politti's alma mater. That would be fitting. This season, I know Politti is going to probably wear the light blue, on Saturday. But it'll be,
because if there's one thing about me, it's my
lacrosse
loyalty to Carolina lacrosse.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So And again, the women's program, I think Kratz tweeted, but she's done as good of a job as any Rutgers coach, on campus over last year.
I can confess that these were the first lacrosse games I've ever watched in full, fellas, and a couple observations. The one thing is like that if there are multiple felonies committed every minute in the men's game. It is insane. They just beat the living crap out of each other.
Yeah.
How are they not? I mean, how do they walk at the end of the season?
Yeah.
And then the women's game is completely. They don't wear helmets in the women's game. It's just a completely different sport entirely. There you go. There's my lacrosse analysis, Cratch.
I agree with
That'll really help my credibility.
Yes, what Melissa Lehman has accomplished is incredible. Because this is she takes over a program that has been underachieving for years. Her first season gets wiped out, 9 games in by the pandemic. And then she comes back to an all Big Ten schedule, makes all these, program first win over Hopkins, Maryland, Penn State, gets them in the NCAA tournament, wins a game.
Yeah.
That's incredible. In year 2, I mean, just a tremendous achievement by that program. I think maybe the most impressive coaching job since I've been on the Rutgers beat in terms of quick rowing. Yes, I think you have to give Justin Price and rowing credit. Because as I've said before, the way when I wrote that story when they made the NCAA tournament in 2019, the way people were talking about the program, I was like, did the boats have holes in them? I mean, were they made of cement? That's how far they were afloat. But even then, just a tremendous turnaround for women's lacrosse. Melissa Lehman really has proven that they potentially have a big time superstar in their hands.
They had the those giant swans they have out the lake when the pedal boats. Was that what they were using? Is that incredible? All right, let's do the big picture here. And I wrote this column this morning, and it's just a question I've asked a lot of Rutgers alums. Is this the best overall season ever? I mean, all right, 5 NCAA tournaments, 3 All-Americans, wrestling, all of these droughts, and I think that's a significant thing. You're crossing off, 31 years for the basketball, 38 for win. I mean, all these different things that you're Xing off. Can you make the case, Sarge? Is it in the top 5? Is it at least in the discussion? What do you think?
It's definitely in the top 5. Men's basketball, what they did, getting there certainly vaulted near there. It's hard to say it's the best when football. And again, I know what he inherited, and he did a really good job last year. But even Greg Schiano has been quite open that 3-6 wasn't good enough. And so when your marquee program is 3-6, and when your marquee program has had years, like the 76 when they were unbeaten, and 61 when they were unbeaten, in 2006 when they obviously became a national story. Really hard to say that it's the best ever when the football program was 3-6. However, I mean, you mentioned it. The NCAA appearances for women's soccer, for men's and women's lacrosse, for men's basketball, winning games, in the NCAA tournament as well. Just a tremendous year, certainly in the top 2 or 3 all time for sure.
Yeah, and the fact that the bottom, and this is overlooked, and I know Rutgers fans are not going to get excited when the volleyball team wins 6 games, or matches, games, whatever they're called. But the fact that they had lost 99 of their first 100, you just think about how low some of these teams were. And I think the fact you're seeing the water rise a little bit at the bottom, and let's be honest, this is what these are the best programs in the country have. Michigan is good at everything. Stanford is good at everything. North Carolina is good at everything. So, once you start seeing the other programs tick up, I mean, I think, the expression that Greg Shannon uses all the time, all the boats rise at the same time, Crash.
No, I mean, so 2 things. One, you touched on in your column, and obviously when all the sports are done, we'll do our annual report card. They're going to have the best winning percentage they've ever had in Big Ten competition. But I looked it up. Not a single Rutgers program finished last place in the Big Ten.
Wow. Huh.
I mean, Rutgers wrestling, obviously, they went 0-4 in 4 dual meets, but if they had wrestled Maryland that night, they would have, so yes, that's an asterisk for them. But they finished, I think 10th out of 14 at the Big Ten championships without Sammy Alvarez. But every program, even softball, which I went 8-36, Penn State had a worse finish, I believe, in the Big Ten softball standings. So, yeah, you have that too. But no program finished in last place. You had programs making steps. The other thing I say too is, even taking aside the wins and the losses, look at the 24 sports. I think you can basically argue that pretty much all of them, with the exception of softball, which is, I think you've got questions about their trajectory going forward, are on an upward trajectory. You've got the coaches that you want to have in place. Everything is kind of rising up. So I think that's another way to look at it too, that this is a really good year, but you're building towards having a year where we say, no doubt, this is the best season they've had.
I talked to Pat Hobbs. He was on his way. They're loading up. This is kind of cool. And this is what happens when you've got a high level. Everyone's rooting for each other. They're loading up the class of 1957 golf van. And I just picture, maybe it was like actually a van. This would be a Rutgers thing, a van from 1957. So they're loading up this van to drive out to Stony Brook to watch the game. A bunch of coaches, a bunch of athletic administrators piling in with a couple crates of Dunkin' Donuts. It's just like a nice. You have to give Hobbs credit for that, Sarge. I mean, he hired a lot of these coaches, not all of them certainly, but he changed. He cleared out some of the dead wood that had been in there for a long time underachieving.
Well, it's the facilities, first and foremost, and he gets a lot of credit for raising the money and the capital and just the goodwill to be able to get these facilities done at a university that really, all these years, did not, build facilities. So, that's first and foremost. And now, as you mentioned in your column, these coaches are using the facilities, the resources that they have available, and they're getting better athletes. So, and really, again, he's hired good coaches. So, by and large, he gets a lot of credit from the Olympic sports standpoint. Probably, the best job any AD's ever done from raising the level of Olympic sports.
Yeah, I think there's two ways as an AD to kind of have success and turn things around. You find a coach like, Bob Mulcahy found Greg Schiano, took a chance on him, it worked out. You also write a check. So the facilities, you wrote a check, you built those facilities. Or, like baseball, everyone knew Steve Owens was a very successful coach who was going to win games here eventually. Pat Hobbs took the jump. He wrote the check. He paid him what it was going to cost to get him out of Bryant. I look back to my alma mater. Eric Hyman wrote the check to hire Dawn Staley. Now they're in the Final Four pretty much every year. So I think it's not just finding these coaches, and Pat has done that. Melissa Lehman, as we just discussed, but it's investing in the program. And I think Rutgers is learning that once you invest in these sports, you're going to be good at them, given the strength of the school's academics and being in New Jersey, where these sports, field hockey, women's soccer, lacrosse, are important to the state.
All right, guys, let's dive into true, false. True or false? You know the rules. Hit you with a couple of topics. You tell me what you think, then we'll discuss. All right, true or false? Rutgers has a legitimate shot at the epic lacrosse upset over in North Carolina. Correct. True or false? Hey, Rutgers Rant listeners, it's Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media. We appreciate you supporting this podcast and the sponsors who help us continue doing it. This week's podcast is brought to you by the New Brunswick Development Corporation. If you listen to this show, you love Rutgers. And if you love Rutgers, you know the positive impact that DevCo has made on the campus and its community. We thank the New Brunswick Development Corporation for its continued support and for helping make this podcast possible. Now back to the show.
True if they can win their face-offs.
Okay, Sarge?
True. They won despite losing their face-offs, so they could probably win even if they lose their face-offs.
All right, I've actually read some UNC lacrosse players. I got to go false on this one. They are a powerhouse. All right, true or false? Never fear. Steve Pikiell has solved his roster concerns with LSU transfer Andre Hyatt. Correct. True or false?
False.
Sarge?
Not yet. False.
Yeah, it's still a false for me too. All right, true or false? There will be a spring game sellout. Correct. True or false?
I have my moles checking into this for the update. Haven't gotten it yet, but I'm going to say false.
That would be terrible. Sarge?
They're going to announce it, so we're right, going to be wrong. But but the Cratch / Jerry Carino head count, I'll be fascinated to see what they come up with.
I love how in terms of the outrage that, and some of it was a little bit ridiculous about the attendance cap, that like one of the defenses from Rutgers was, well, I mean, we never really had that many people there. We just made it up.
That was tremendous, by the way. Absolutely. The context of that.
You guys believed our attendance figures? Come on.
Basically, and we had written it. Dan Duggan and I back then, we had actually done, stories of recapping the attendance, and those were all based on announced attendance figures. Like during the early, Greg Schiano years, even going into Kyle Flood, they would announce like 20,000 fans, 15,000 fans. And then when Cratch does a story, basically the word inside the program was, hey, when was the last time we ever got more than 7,500 fans for a spring game?
I love it.
And even back in the day, we used to inflate those numbers, right? They absolutely acknowledged the fact that they did that. All that they kind of changed Cratch's narrative this time around. Beautiful. It was priceless.
They didn't even have. I remember when they brought in that band, Rich and Stupid, or
Big and Rich.
We counted
$100,000 check.
$100,000 check. They had like 200 fans on the field. They could have just handed all those people a $50 bill instead, and make them come. That was my favorite one. Big and Rich. Oh my gosh. All right, where were we? Oh, true or false? Oh, I got a couple more. True or false? Other than the quarterbacks, the player we're most interested to see in the spring game is Josh Youngblood. True or false?
False.
Sarge?
True.
All right, I'm going false as well. I'll tell you why in a minute. Other than the quarterbacks, the player we're most interested in seeing in the spring game is Patrice Rene. True or false, Cratch?
True.
Wow. All right. Sarge?
I mean, I can't say true to both, so I'll say false.
All right. Okay. Well, I have to answer this for myself. Other than the quarterbacks, the player we're most interested to see in the spring game is Valentino Ambrosio. You guys forget that we still – true. That's we still know who the kicker is in this team, right? I mean, that was a question at the end of last year. But who are the kickers?
I believe I hear it's Adam Shire or Schiano, but Valentino is the guy.
Yep.
But
Okay.
Steve is a good point. I think that the whole, it remains to be seen if he is the upgrade from Justin Davidovitz that Greg Schiano and staff seem so convinced he is.
And I'm going to add one more that the Cratch just mentioned, because it's a great question. All right, the 2020-21 Rutgers Coach of the Year is women's lacrosse coach Melissa Lehman. True or false? Cratch, we know your answer.
True.
Sarge, what is your answer?
True.
Really?
Yeah.
Both true?
For what she had inherited, and yeah, absolutely. Year two.
The basketball coach.
Yeah, but Pikiell and I get that, and again, they got to the NCAA, but they would have been to the NCAA tournament last year. If we were doing this podcast,
They won a game.
discussion,
Okay.
yeah, but they last year was Pikiell's year,
Okay,
where they made that leap. And look, we forget, like, go back to the art, like there were times where we were really questioning Steve Pikiell. Like you can make a case that at least in the regular season that they might have underachieved a little bit, but again, overall body of work, Pikiell's done an incredible job. But if you're just asking which coach has done the best job this year, it has to be Lehman.
Interesting. Okay. And we all don't think that Pikiell solved his questions here, which is, you kind of have to. He took the program out of the Big Ten basement and made it into the second round of the NCAA tournament. You kind of have to give him the benefit of the doubt. But I have doubts. I can't tell you about, and I understand that Andre Hyatt's a good addition. But overall, guys, there's still some front court issues there.
Yeah, they need size. Like they need a big man, and you're probably going to get Ron and Gio back, and that's going to obviously help. But they need a big man. We've seen this program even when they had Miles. If Miles got into foul trouble, they were in trouble. And Cliff's going to make big strides, but you need that second or third guy because he's inevitably going to have 2 fouls 5 minutes into a game.
All right. Anything else we want to cover? Or can I dive into our Rutgers Insider questions?
Let's dive in.
Dive in. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Of course, as always, NJ.com Insider. It's always fun to discuss stuff with you, and a bunch of good questions this week, as always. Here's one that comes up. Tailgating at the spring game. What the hell is the point of us going with no tailgating? Why is this university so far behind society and New Jersey? it's an interesting point. And the one thing I'll say about this, guys, you know, I live in Montclair, obviously the world's most liberal town. I think it's just only been now that people, when the mask mandate came up, when Fauci said, okay, you don't have to worry about that outdoors, Murphy lifted all the restrictions. This was the first weekend I saw people walking around without masks in the park and at the ice cream shop. You know, it might just be the timing when they were planning this that gave it to this point. I mean, what do you think overall? Should we hold them responsible for not allowing more fans and not allowing tailgating?
The issue is, and it goes back to the fact that they don't have graduation ceremonies, and John Holloway's taking his lumps for that as well. The issue is they made these decisions back when we had no idea where the world was going to be in May. Don't forget, like the football program had a 2.5 week quarantine, just 2 months ago. So, they made these decisions back when no one knew. But the issue is Rutgers is terrible at calling audibles and changing things on the fly, whereas other universities, other police society have been able to do that. Rutgers has a lot of smart people, and I think the more often than not, there's just a reluctance of doing things, is changing their mind on stuff. That's the biggest issue. The biggest issue is they should be able to accommodate tailgating, because again, what is the point? And the rest of society is moving forward in this instance.
I will say too, I think one of the big issues with Rutgers, and Sarge's absolutely right, they do not audible well, is they do not help themselves out. And I think this is not only just this, it's since the pandemic started. Rutgers has not been transparent about a lot of things, and if they just come out and explain themselves,
that's a great point.
Would be so. I'll give you something I know for a fact. Rutgers internally mapped it out. If you were sticking to 6 feet of social distancing, and I don't know if that's still the CDC guideline. I think it might be the state of New Jersey guideline, because Murphy is now is holding back on their stuff. If you stick with the 6 feet of social distancing between seated parties, the max capacity of SHI Stadium, they've projected is about 10 grand. So if they come out and say, we're basically at 10 grand max because of this federal guideline, I think people would understand the 5,000 cap more. They also don't come out and say that I'm pretty sure, and if I'm wrong, forgive me, that there's the player and coach family members are not included in the $5 grand. That the $5 grand is the tickets they're valuing to the general public. So there's they have to accommodate those people too. Like, it goes back to when they weren't allowing fans at the baseball game and people were ripping them for it, and unnecessarily, because the problem was that Rutgers was restricted to having 200 people at Baton Field, and they were making sure that their players and coaches and the visiting team had passes for parents and family members. And when that got done, they had like 180 people there, and you're not going to have 20 people from the outside come to the game when it's first come, first serve and no one knows what's going on. So I think they just have not done a very good job of communicating where they're coming from. And if they had simply said, look, this is the number we have for X, Y, and Z, I think people would be more accepting. I also think that the graduation decision has really tied their hands. I was in Texas this past weekend. My sister-in-law graduated from Texas A&M. Congratulations, Claire. And they had in-person graduation, and it was the most efficient thing I've ever seen in my life. You literally got into the basketball arena. The graduation started at 9 a.m. on the dot. Once my watch hit 9 a.m. it started. They played the music. They rolled in. One of the vice presidents gave a little speech. They played a canned video from the chancellor and the Board of Regents president. One graduate came up, gave a nice 5-minute speech. They started calling names. They called your name. You walked across the stage. You walked out of the arena. Your family walked out of the arena. You took a photo outside. The place was cleared within an hour, and they started another one shortly after. Rutgers could definitely do that. They just chose not to do that. And I think Sarge is right. They made a decision in January when things were not as clear, and now things are opening up again, thank God. And they just don't want to be flexible and adjust on the fly. I think that's limited the spring game, and it's limited graduation. But I think the hope has to be that by the fall, this is all going to kind of end.
A lot of people really angry about the graduation thing, without question, and it's because of what you say. It just seems so logical that anybody else could figure it out, but Rutgers, of course, did not. All right, let's dive into another question. Could the Johnny Langan package expand into a role at tight end like Taysom Hill, New Orleans quarterback, especially since the tight end was a weak position last year? It's a great question. You send it directly to Steve Gleason, the new $1 million coordinator, which we haven't discussed yet. We should discuss here. You've got a guy as creative as him who obviously has proven he can use his best personnel in different situations. I mean, Kratz, that seems like a no-brainer, putting Langan in a tight end situation.
Definitely. I think they should have been doing that, last season. I think he's a guy who you can do a lot of different creative things with, and I think definitely a lead blocker as an H-back role would be tremendous for Langan. We broke that story, I think, last week or the week before. It's a big move for Rutgers to, make Sean, as I wrote in the story, when Rutgers joined the Big Ten, their head coach didn't even make $1 million. And now they've got $1 million offensive coordinator. I think the best thing for Rutgers is you're buying yourself time. The way the contract is structured, you're going to have Sean Gleason when Gavin Wimsack gets to campus, which I think is a big thing for the Scarlet Knights.
Absolutely. All right, diving into more questions. Jacob Allen, that's the 6'5", 265-pound tackle from the Hun, number 2 junior in the state. Looks like he's close to committing. Anyone else close to committing for football or basketball? And the update today I just texted from Todd Rucont was that it looks very good for Jacob Allen, who's got, just basically every offer imaginable, including Penn State and Miami, and to think that they already have a 4-star quarterback, and if they could land a 4-star offensive lineman, the number 2 player in the class, in addition to already having, I think, 4 or 5 really good offensive linemen. I mean, this is a top 10 recruiting class now. It's just hard to imagine it would go up a couple notches, but it could. I mean, what do you guys know about recruiting right now?
I think, I believe Allen's the guy to watch. I think there's some other guys are in, but at the same time too, like they only can bring in so many guys in 2022 because of, the waiver and everything and natural scholarship crunch. So it wouldn't shock me if Rutgers is getting close to being done. They're also going to want to have spots for, transfers next offseason. And I think if the program continues to succeed, you might be in the market for better transfers than they were even this year. So I would not be surprised if once they get Allen in the fall, I know it's a big thing and they're trending in the right direction there, that maybe that's kind of the end and they start to maybe kind of try to contain the class and keep it together rather than add to it.
This is interesting, and Sarge, I think this really does. If you look into Greg Schiano's skill sets, program building, behind the scenes details, it's the coronavirus until obviously what happened this spring, but that's something that falls into his, it's something he'd be good at managing that stuff. I have to imagine that this roster management stuff really does fall into his, schools are going to have problems with this, keeping this number to 85. I think Schiano is going to figure out a way to make sure the best players are the ones who remain in this program.
Yeah, I've been told countless times that, we're going to see, what happened in basketball with the transfer portal, the big wave of basketball, we're going to see after spring camp, not just at Rutgers, but, at a lot of other places that there's going to be a lot of programs. Don't forget, FCS programs, played this spring. So there's going to be a lot more openings. There weren't any openings, from January until now, on the FCS level. So, I think you're going to see a lot more players, not just at Rutgers, heading into the transfer portal. At some point it's going to become, salary cap, management, and Greg Schiano is really, really good at that. They're going to, try to find a home, work with these players. They're going to be very, very careful to say, that they're not, pushing anyone, taking anyone's scholarship away, that they're going to try to find homes for a lot of these guys. But Cratch is right. They're going to need some roster spots, and there's just a lot of questions about, how they're going to be able to trim down from basically 100 down to 85, for 2022.
All right, another good question from Chris Monty in Toronto, Ontario. I didn't know our Rutgers Insider program was international, but apparently we get up to Toronto, which is good. Is Rutgers a lock to stay in the Big Ten and be part of major college athletics for the long haul, or is there any risk that it could be the odd man out if another round of realignment takes place when the next series of TV contracts get signed by the conferences? It's an interesting point. I mean, I think, you're already seeing now Pac-12 introducing their new commissioner, surprise name, which of course I cannot remember. I'm sure one of you guys might be able to pull out of your hat. That there's already talk about what will they do for more expansion. Do you think we're headed that way? And would Rutgers be in a situation where they could be, trying to grab a chair again? What do you think?
No, I think, if you look at the history of college football, Vanderbilt, the only reason why Vanderbilt's in the SEC is because they had like the foresight, or more likely the dumb luck back in the day, to not leave the conference when Tulane and Georgia Tech did. But they've never been kicked out. Northwestern wasn't kicked out back in their dark ages. So no, I think Rutgers is in the Big Ten. Like, they're not going anywhere. I mean, and if Rutgers is not in the Big Ten someday, it's probably not because Rutgers has been kicked out of the Big Ten. It's because the Big Ten doesn't exist after Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State and Nebraska left to form the the college football super league on Amazon Prime. No, I actually don't. I think we'll see some expansion potentially, but I don't think we're going to see massive expansion, because if you look at the board, I mean, what's there really for the Pac-12 to add? You could add UNLV, I guess. Do you really need that? Does that really move the needle for you? BYU would move the needle, but there's a lot of complications to adding BYU. So, no, I think we're not going to see much expansion. I think Rutgers is safely in the Big Ten as long as it wants to be in the Big Ten, and as long as the Big Ten exists.
Sarge, do you agree with that?
I think we're going to see some expansion and a new wave in the next couple of years, because I think what the coronavirus really did was it exposed the haves and the have-nots even more. And what we're seeing with the NIL stuff that's going to be happening, we're going to see even emerge even more where these big programs are just going to want to separate themselves from the mid majors, and so I think we're going to see it. Crash mentions, some of the schools, but, Texas, they're always a prime target. They've always been, kind of, waiting in the wings a little bit. So, does either the Big Ten or the Pac-12 make another run at, Texas, down the line? I think we're going to see it, between by the end of this decade. I think we're going to see another wave of expansion.
All right, final question. That's a good one, Cratch. My big question for James is, did Francesa remember him as the guy he called clueless a few years ago? Remember that story? What did you piss him off about?
So I'm trying to think. Yeah, okay, so it was when WFAN basically got banned by the Garden after Maggie Gray criticized Jim Dolan, and Francesa went on, he had this like monologue where he was kind of like this talking about a bunch of things, and he implied that he was going to give up his app. Remember the Mike's On app and everything. And so I wrote a story saying it sounds like the app is on the chopping block. And then Mike, I guess that was wrong. So Mike ripped me, called me clueless, dense. I didn't understand technology, all that.
How's the app doing now? The app is
well, that's the thing. Like, the app was gone within 3 months of that story hitting. But no, to answer your question, no, I don't think Mike had any idea who I was. And I identified myself, obviously, James Cratch, NJ.com, all that. But no, Mike was great. Very pleasant. Very cooperative. Appreciate the interview, but no,
I get the sense he's just sitting in an office in Long Island with no one to talk to, right? I mean, this has got to be it. He's just got nothing to do at this point.
Well, thanks for puncturing my, I just figured, hey, or I could say, hey, maybe he know. But I actually talked to someone one time who knows Mike, and they said that when Mike rips someone, there's two different, there are people he truly has animosity with, and then there are people, and the guy said it best, is I was just part of the show that one day, kind of a shooting star in the galaxy. That was just my day to be part of the circus, and then you move on.
Gotta love it. All right. Well, that was fun stuff, gentlemen. I appreciate all the questions from NJ.com, NJ.com/insider. Please sign up, text us early and often. We look forward to hearing from you. I guess we'll be back on Monday, guys, right? When we're doing a show on Monday to talk about the spring game, to give our breakdown of our attendance numbers, quarterbacks, everything that happens then, and maybe some more lacrosse, some more insight about lacrosse from me, because that's what the people really want to hear is my abundance of knowledge about that sport. And any final thoughts?
I think we'll be back on Monday, and then Politi will go on vacation for the next 3 or 4 or 5 months. I think after that.
Okay, that's about. I do have 5 months vacation. How did you know that?
Well, I mean, everyone knows that by now.
My contract. All right, gents, enjoyed it. Everyone, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at NJ.com/insider.
You haven't heard enough from me yet, huh? Steve Politi here for one last thank you to this episode's sponsor, New Brunswick Development Corporation, and to listeners like you who make it all the way to the end of the show. We'll see you again soon.